Hello, 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 and welcome to Mind, Body, and Stress with Dr. Yolanda. And this is one of my favorite topics. So June is Men's Health Awareness Month. Actually, May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and now June is Men's Health Awareness Month. And what we decided to do here on blackdoctor.org with Mind, Body, and Stress with Dr. Yolanda today is really sort of address those two topics together, this being so early in the month and us coming off of the heels of mental health awareness. So we're actually talking today about Black men and mental health. And this is a very important topic because we often do not sort of give enough attention to or recognition for a lot of what our Black men in general, are dealing with when it comes to mental health, because it's such a stigma to really talk about mental health issues. It comes across as for so many people, the stigma of being either weak or vulnerable in any way. And it's so not. It really takes a strong person to talk about things that are going on in their lives and ways they're dealing with it. So we want to talk about Black men and mental health today. So before we do that, I want to know, where are you watching from? Where are you joining in from today? So rep your city. I want to know where you are. Ironically, I'm usually in Washington, D.C. when I'm addressing y'all, when I'm coming to y'all live. But guess what? I'm not in Washington, D.C. right now. I am in Harlem, New York. And that's because I'm here for one of the first events to kick off Harlem Pride or Pride Month. There's a Harlem Pride event that I will be attending this evening. And it's very exciting because one of our co-founders for Harlem Festival of Culture and the co-chair of Harlem Festival of Culture Foundation, Musa Jackson, shout out to Musa, is going to be honored today by Harlem Pride. So I am here in New York, in Harlem, New York, to celebrate Harlem Pride or Pride Month by attending that celebration. But where are you joining in from today? I'm joining in from New York. So when you guys get a chance, I see Illinois, Elk Grove Village, Illinois is here today. Thanks to you. See you out there, Vincent. I see you, Dr. Bernadette, in Daytona Beach, Florida. We have to talk about Daytona Beach and how Florida is doing and how you holding up, sis, in Florida, because we all need to be praying for y'all in Florida. So we might have to connect after this and talk about your mental health, right? So, but if you're joining us from somewhere, let us know, chime in, tell us where you're joining us from, because we're excited to have you. I got my my Instagram live on, and I got people joining from Philadelphia. They're joining from DC. Yes, prayers for Florida, right? So I see you, Malika Young in Philadelphia. I see you, Don White in DC. Yes, Lord, Dr. Bernadette said, I see you. I see you. So we are praying for you. We're going to put outstretched hands in a little while for Dr. Bernadette and all of our Floridites or Floridians or however y'all say it out there. But we're going to talk about Black men and mental health today. Wait, Robin and Joe, that's my sister-in-law. She's joining in from Seattle, Washington, y'all. So we got some people on the line. So listen, we're going to talk about it. So mental health or mental illness has risen in the U.S. And according to the National Institute of Health, 1 in 5 Americans, that's 20%. When you talk about the numbers, I see you, Sheila McLean from Downingtown, Pennsylvania. So if it's roughly 20%, that's over 50 million Americans that are dealing with mental health issues or some sort of disorder. And we often don't talk enough about it. If there's that many of us that are experiencing it, then why aren't we freely talking about it? And a lot of times it's because of stigma. But talking about it, we have to actually recognize what are some of the communities that are dealing with it even more and for what reasons. So Black people living in the U.S. are subject to greater levels of factors that drive depression, such as poverty and violence. According to the 2014 U.S. Census Bureau, the poverty rate for Black men ages 18 to 64 was 21%. Now, here it is. We make up 14% of the population. Actually, it's decreasing. We're down to like 13.3% of the population, but 21% of poverty. And as a result, our Black youth are exposed to poverty and violence that sow the seeds for things like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder in our lives. According to the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, African Americans are 20% more likely to experience serious psychological distress, such as major depressive disorder, than white Americans. And furthermore, rates of major depressive disorders in our Black adults that are age 18 to 25 increased by more than 3 to 5%, depending on which studies you're looking at, between 2015 and 2018. And this is all according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Many of us know it as SAMHSA. But Black Americans of all groups are less likely to seek treatment than white Americans. And why are they less likely? We're going to have that conversation, and I want to invite you all to join us. As many of you know, I wear many hats outside of this show here that I do once a month. I am a double board physician. I'm a pediatrician as well as a bariatrician. So I'm at Children's National Medical Center. Shout out to Children's. But I'm also the director of Health Equity and Community Impact for the Harlem Festival of Culture Foundation. And we have kicked off our health equity series. Last month, we did Black maternal health, and we did our show last month on Black maternal health. But this month, we are actually diving into, you guessed it, Black men and mental health. And next Friday on June 9th, we will be hosting an event at the Harlem School of Arts. And we're going to be talking to mental health professionals both locally here in the New York area from Northwell Health. Shout out to Northwell. They're the sponsors for that event. But we also have some providers that are national providers. Dr. Melvin McDowell. He is out of Detroit, Michigan, and he owns his own mental health practice. He's a Black man who owns his own mental health practice. And we'll be talking about why is it that Black people seek services less? A lot of it is connected to stigma. Yes, we talk about it, how it doesn't seem to be within our, there we go. That's our graphic about our event next week, next week. But sometimes we don't seek it. We don't seek mental health because of the stigma attached. But the other big problem is the access. We don't have access to healthcare like we should. We know we don't have access to physical health care, and Lord knows there's even a bigger shortage when it comes to mental health care. There are mental health care shortages, what we call mental health care deserts throughout this country. I know Washington, D.C. has a mental health care desert, just like we talk about food deserts. We talk about mental health care deserts, but they're all around the country. They definitely plague the South. We just definitely don't have enough. And then even in places where there are mental health specialists, they tend to be in zip codes that we don't live in. And so we need to talk about that. So in addition to trauma, Black men deal with a constellation of racism-related stressors like discrimination, stereotypes, mass incarceration, and police brutality, or over-policing that often leads to the incarceration rate that we're talking about that is disproportionate for Black Americans. These stressors, they degrade our Black men's emotional and mental well-being. to various degrees. Some people can handle it. Some people it's just a little bit stressful. Their blood pressure raises when that police car is driving by, but others have a much harder time. It's not just about their physical responses, but emotionally, they're traumatized and sometimes are experiencing PTSD for things that have happened in their childhood or as adolescents or even as adults. So, when paired with social norms and ideals about masculinity that require men to remain strong and stoic, we don't let them, Black women have this too. Don't let them see you break down. Don't let them see you sweat. But our men, it's 100 times worse for our men. And so there's this idea that for to be masculine, you stay strong, you don't let anything bother you, you're stoic, there's no emotion shown, and that's really affecting how people show up emotionally. Then we wonder why in relationships they're not able to maybe express themselves or talk the way we'd like them to, or be vulnerable, because we've been teaching them from such a young age as boys that you can't do that you don't do that. Man up. Everyone's heard someone say that to a young boy who might fall, who might hurt himself. But that man up is hurtful when what you're teaching is create these buffers so that you don't feel anything, so no one can get to you. Well, when no one can get to you, guess who else can't get to you? Their spouses, their children, other people in the community. It's really tough to tell somebody to create this hard exterior and shell and then ask them what's wrong with you when you need them to be vulnerable for you. So we got to think about that. We got to talk about that, and we got to address it in our communities. So one of the things that we did talk about is this inability or this sort of, I don't know, conditioning not to show these feelings and to stay strong has a harsh reality and raises the risk of depression when you can't really deal with your emotions because you've been taught not to. It actually raises your risk for depression. Symptoms of depression that are commonly found in men include sleeping too much or too little, loss of focus, maybe anger, substance abuse, sexual dysfunction, physical pain. And this is why when I say this mind, body, and stress thing is very important, this axis, this intersection between what's going on with you mentally and then how your body actually expresses it. I mean, a lot of it is connected to what's going on with your emotions. This is, I mean, what's going on with the stressors that's affecting your mind and your body. This thing is very real. And not only physical pain, but suicidal thoughts. These are the young men or even older men. We all know, and we were all shocked when we saw the young man Twitch who took his life last year, and wondered, well, how could this be? We see him on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. We see him on social media. He's having a great time. He's always, seems loving with his wife. And none of those things are not true. But it doesn't mean that internally there were some things that he was toiling with and very likely unable to express and not in touch with how he could and should deal with them. And so we don't want to continue to have these stories. I remember when Regina King's son committed suicide, I thought, oh my God, like these are our young men. These are our young ones, and they seemingly have everything going for them. You have a mom who has, and in his own right, he was very actually successful in music and in the industry. So what is it that we were missing? And oftentimes we don't know, and they're just unable or maybe sometimes unwilling to let us in. But we got to talk about how we're conditioning some of our men, our Black men in our community, not to let us in. We can't tell them, be hard, man up, and then have a problem when they're unable to express themselves or unwilling to express themselves, especially if it feels like they're going to be attacked for doing so. So as a result, many Black men may hold on to unrealistic ideals, even of what masculinity is, as a way to fight against their emotional distress. For example, many Black men believe that gaining financial success, for instance, is a masculine ideal. You know, I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to provide for them. I'm going to be head of household. I'm going to take, you know, and that is very important for all of us, but we've put a particular burden on our men. And again, this isn't to say that we shouldn't expect our men to be able to be leaders in our homes, but here's part of the problem when it comes to the financial piece. They believe that this is going to relieve their oppression. However, structural racism in the form of residential segregation, you can't just live anywhere you want to live in any zip code you want to have when you're Black in our community, and especially with our Black men. Labor market discrimination, you don't get the jobs that you go for, that you're qualified for because of this color of your skin, and because you don't get the skills and you don't get the mentorship and the leadership in your life, again, because they've been limited because of racism, structural racism, and then a lifetime of negative stereotyping and over criminalization severely undermines Black men's economic opportunities. Oftentimes, we don't even talk about the educational piece, right? That our Black boys, sometimes they're identified and targeted at such a young age in school. And when that happens, they're labeled as, you know, troublemakers, too energetic, ADHD, whatever the case is, and then they don't excel necessarily in school. And so as they're trying to make their way and climb that ladder, the educational piece, you know, getting into good schools, going from high school into college itself costs so much money. There are not a lot of scholarship opportunities at times if you're not already athletic. And talk about masculinity stereotypes. You got to be a ball player. You got to be, you know, track star. You got to be something when it comes to your physical prowess to get that scholarship if you can't get these academic scholarships, which are harder to get if you've been targeted and stereotyped from young. So this thing, when we talk about it, guys, we can really like dive deep, because our young Black boys are treated, again, and I love that Ellis put this graphic up. They're often seen as 4 years older than they are and expected to act differently and to be more mature. And the same with our young girls. Our young girls, Black girls, are over sexualized and believed to be much older than they are as we're growing up. So there's all of this stuff, right, that we're dealing with, and we're not talking about, nor are we making connections to often when we talk about mental health in our communities. So let's the other thing that we can the other thing that that comes out of this is in 2015, Black men earned, y'all listen to this, 31% less than white men. A third less. We are talking about gender equality when we talk about getting the bag, but we often don't talk about or continue to talk about how even our men, our Black men, are earning a third less than white men in the same profession, with the same education, with the same opportunities, are earning a third less than white men. This wage gap persists even when looking at those who are college educated, and the earning gaps between college educated Black and white men was 20% in 2014. So even with the same education and degrees, we're still, our Black men still earn 1/5 less than white men. With the same education. A recent report from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics paints an even bleaker picture for Black men in the current labor market. Because right now we're talking about that overall, the country only has 7% unemployment. That looks really good. But guess what? 6.8% of unemployment rates for Black men are mainly driven of this unemployment rate. It's because Black men's unemployment rate is so high. So that 6.8% is for the country. And that's because of the 7% unemployment rate for Black men. So Black men's struggles with ideals of masculinity have been shaped by many things. And one study that I was looking at in 2019, it's in the Journal of Psychology of Men and Masculinities, revealed that in America, we've been inundated with all of these images, right? Television, social media, and they depict our Black men as overly masculine, very, and a lot of us are guilty of it. We see it, we're like, ooh, look at them muscles, look at this, look at that. But in many cases, the other thing that kind of comes along with that in the media and in these images is that our Black men are overly aggressive, or again, that they're hypersexual. And as Ellis had put up on the screen, our boys are seen as 4 years older than they are. Oh, hey, Chantel Simmons out of Bermuda. Good to have you. Chantel Simons. Good to have you from Bermuda and listening in on this topic. But again, they're seen as overly masculine, overly sexualized, and also aggressive. And this explains that open displays of emotion, on the other hand, are often frowned upon. This study says that these open expressions of emotions are frowned upon and not socially acceptable. And this sends a clear message to our Black men that to be accepted, they have to fit a particular gender role in which strength and stoicism, when that stoic person is that person who doesn't show emotion, they stay calm under all circumstances. I want you to be calm and cool-headed and collected when things happen, but not show no emotion. Like, that's just unrealistic for a human being. But in this study, it showed that those are the types of things that are sort of mandatory to be accepted as a Black man. And it's funny because even as I'm saying it, I find myself, this sort of gesture where I poke out my chest and I swell up my shoulders. But that's what I think of when I think of these images, right? How our men are supposed to show up. And it's very unfortunate. And it is seen that the foundation of Black masculinity construct is laid very early, as I was talking about, with many Black men growing up believing their psychological and their emotional health and wellness just don't matter, right? They're not a part of who they are. It's not a part of what they need to be productive. It's not valuable to how the community needs to operate. We just need you to work hard, be strong, be the producers, and we'll take care of the psychological, emotional needs of families and our kids. And that's just not true. We need our men. We need our men to be emotional, to show what that emotion looks like, to express themselves when they need to, not just when we need them to. Let's be really clear about that. And I'm gonna say that again, ladies. We oftentimes want our Black men to express themselves when we ask them to, when we want their opinion, when we want them to show up for us, we want them to be vulnerable. But we don't allow our Black men to be vulnerable and to express themselves when they need to express themselves. And that's the relationship that we need to foster. That's the environment that we need to cultivate, right? I see, let me see, did I have any questions or any comments that I'm missing? Because, Ellis helps me stay on track and make sure that we're in on this thing. So absolutely, then the fear is that they are vulnerable. If they're vulnerable, what the backlash would be or how they would be perceived from that point. Thank you, Dr. Burnett. And that's exactly what happens is they can't trust how we're going to receive them, because that one time you backlash, that one time that you call somebody out of their name, and you know what I'm talking about, certain words we might use, someone says or does something that you felt was soft, and you say the wrong thing, they're never going to give you the opportunity to say that again. So guess what? They're never going to go back there because you've lost their trust to be able to express themselves with you freely. So this is a very important comment and thing to consider. So it was the study was talking about that many Black men, they internalize this idea that their value lies in what they contribute physically, such as through sports, performing physical labor, fixing whatever you need to fix around the house, doing whatever you need to do. But that's the only thing that you bring to the table, right? And that discussing and exploring this psychological or emotional concerns is, is in direct contradiction to societal expectations for our to work on that. So self-examination is not, for many Black men, they see it as pointless. What is it going to achieve, right? How is this going to help me? Because what's expected of me is not what's on the inside of me, it's what I can produce outside of me. They also saw in this study, it was shown that they saw it as a sign of weakness. However, despite these norms, this is something to be hopeful about. Despite these norms and the frequent sort of inner struggle over vulnerability, more and more Black men are sharing their challenges with mental health. In 2016, the rapper Kid Cudi openly talked about his depression on social media. I don't know how many of you all caught this. I had to look it up when I read this because I wasn't aware of it, because I didn't know this particular rapper, given my age. But again, this young man openly shared his depression, and as reported by the Good Men Project, after this happened, after he shared this, the hashtag "You Good Man" was something that they created. And it quickly began to trend on Twitter to encourage Black men to share more about mental health. Also, I read that all wrong. I read that like I wasn't in the Black community. The hashtag is "You Good Man." Like, are you good? If you're not, check in. Let us know how you're doing. And just tell us what's happening and what are your challenges so that we can talk about them. In 2018, Jay-Z, the music mogul, he added to the conversation in an interview with Van Jones on CNN. You good? There you go. My fellow Black man here, Ellis, had to help me out and put it up like it's supposed to be said. Like, are you good? That was funny right there. But Jay-Z he shared on CNN with Van Jones. He discussed his own experience in going to therapy, and dealing with his own emotions and mental health, and the ridiculousness of the stigma. Like, what's wrong with seeking any kind of therapy? You're gonna go to a physician and receive help when your asthma is acting up because you need the albuterol. You're going to go to someone when you sprain your ankle. Well, why is it that we're not okay with going to someone when we're dealing with emotional stressors? Because these emotional stressors don't just affect you. Be real, be honest. It affects your family. It affects your environment. It may affect your work. It may affect your ability to just maintain on a daily basis. And that's not going to be okay. You're not going to just muster through that and muscle through that, which is, again, part of the problem when we believe that we have to do these things ourselves. I can't talk to anybody. I got this. You good. I'm strong. Never let them see all of this stuff that we've been creating in these conditions we've been creating for ourselves. Then we don't accept or receive the help that we need and that most of us need on a daily basis, including myself. I've definitely sought mental health services specifically during the pandemic, and I want to be very open about that. So members of the music industry they're not the only ones that are sort of out here sharing their efforts and talking about their mental health. There are TV portrayals that are also shifting, that are allowing us to see our Black men in these vulnerable ways and talk about mental health and what things are stressing them and how they're managing it. In 2020, there's an episode of FX's Dave Regata, and he plays a version of his real self on the show, as this, hype man to Lil Dicky, I guess. And he revealed that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And the episode was received by fans, like widely received, well received. They loved that he was able to talk about it. And he later openly shared his real life experiences with the diagnosis of bipolar. In season 4 of the HBO series Insecure, and I used to love, girl, y'all love me some Insecure. Issa Rae, the character that played her on again, off again boyfriend, Nathan, who that was his character on the show, he confided in her that he had been diagnosed with bipolar, and then they were able to sort of write that issue, write that into the plot for season 5. So anyway, one of the things that we were actually planning to do, and it was sort of going to lead in right at this point, was we had a guest that was planned for today. So if you saw the graphic, you know that there's a young man, CJ Penny, who was planning to be on the show today. Unfortunately, he was pulled in some other directions and sort of happened last minute. He was texting me just literally 30 minutes before the show, like, I hope this is okay. I said, you know what, CJ, first of all, it's all about taking care of self. Anytime we have something we're dealing with, I need you to take care of your mental illness, your mental wellness rather. And when your mental wellness needs you to like slow down and do some things and pivot, then by all means you pivot. So suggested he pivot today and take care of some things he was dealing with. But here's the deal. CJ, that's not the end of the time that you can actually see CJ or hear about his story, because the graphic that we showed again, for the mental health, men and mental health series that we're kicking off at the Harlem School of the Arts on June 9th from 6:30 to 9:30. The event, first of all, is in a very beautiful space. So I really encourage, if y'all are in the Harlem area, to come on out next week. But it starts off, we're kicking off that 3-hour event with a 20-minute short film. And that film is called Normalized. If you have a moment to look it up. It's called Normalized. CJ Penny is actually in the movie, but the protagonist in that movie is actually based off of his life, right? CJ himself suffers from bipolar disorder. At a time was dealing with how he was self-medicating with substance abuse. Now he's sober and clean. And this is something that he talks about openly, and how he has to sort of remain that way, and what are the things that he has to sort of put in place. But it also shows in this short film how the stressors of society and racism and depression and all the stuff that sort of layers themselves on us on a daily basis, how it sort of all came to a head and almost ended tragically for him. And so the film really shows a great sort of episode of what someone's life looks like as this sort of unravels because of things that sort of happen on a daily basis. And CJ's very open about talking about how he deals with it on a daily basis, because it's a daily I won't just call it a struggle. I'll call it a journey, a daily journey to remain aware of what it is you're managing, how much you can manage, and how you best manage the things that are going on in your life. But so that's a shameless plug. I will then tell you that's part of our weekend. But guys, if you're in the New York area, and if you're not, come up here, because on Sunday, I'm proud to say, as the Director of Health Equity, we are, again, our sponsor being Northwell Health. We are partnering with Allen Houston. He's a former Knicks player, and he's a part of what we're calling our Father's Day Grill and Chill. This is a pre-Father's Day event, so it's the Sunday before Father's Day. And Allen Houston has a foundation. It's the foundation is called Fizzle. You can see it there on our graphic. That's their logo. And it stands for Faith, Integrity, Sacrifice, Leadership, and Legacy. Brilliant. and he's teaching these young men, young Black men, all young men, but he's a lot of emphasis on our young Black men, about what that looks like, right? To be a leader. And this isn't about masculinity. It's about having faith in God and in your community. Your integrity, your word is bond. When you say you're going to do something and you put yourself out there, how do you show up? Sacrifice. That's a beautiful word. We so often in our community don't talk about how do we do what we need to do and have others benefit for that. It doesn't mean you lay down and you be a doormat or welcome mat, but we do need to find ways to sacrifice for the greater good. And then leadership and legacy. What are we leaving behind, right? How are we setting it up so that the generations behind us have it better than we have right now? That's actually, it's definitely an obligation of all of ours, right? It's a responsibility. So anyway, so moving forward, although there's some progress that's been made toward destigmatizing the mental health issues among Black men, more has to be done. And so I just want to leave you with a couple of tips to consider when looking for someone, a professional counselor. So this is where, when we're going to have our discussion next week, Dr. Melvin McDowell will be talking about this from his point of view as a Black male with a mental health professional clinic that he runs. We're also going to have Dr. and y'all here at blackdoctor.org. She is she's somebody who y'all are very familiar with. Dr. Gigi, we call her Gigi, Dr. Gigi, but Jahan El Bayumi, she's going to be on the panel. She is an amazing physician, amazing mentor, a wealth of knowledge. And she's the director, founding director. Yes, we love Dr. Gigi. She's a founding director of the Rodham Institute, whose sole purpose is to really train future healthcare leaders, and to be able to address the healthcare disparities that exist in this country. And she's right out of Washington, D.C. She's coming on up to New York next week to be on our panel. And again, we have our founder, co-founder, Musa Jackson, who will be on the panel. And then we have healthcare professionals from the Northwell Health team who will be also joining us. But that being said, when looking for someone who, when you're seeking healthcare services, there are a couple tips I want to leave you with. The first is that treatment in all forms is entirely confidential. So I know everyone talks about the stigma about seeking healthcare, mental health care, and what is that going to look like, and what will people say and know. But the truth is, everything you talk about is confidential. You going is confidential. No one can share that you've come to see them. So it's just your job to be discreet and finding out who. And guess what? In today's environment, you can seek and get your mental health services through online services. So no one even needs to know that you left your house to go get services, okay? To have an opportunity to talk to someone on a regular basis. So the service itself is confidential. All counselors are ethically bound to maintain the confidentiality of their clients, and they're subject to losing their license if they fail to do so. And so I encourage you, I implore you, especially if you are a Black man, to not worry about the skeletons and the stuff that you got to pull out and you might have to rake through and go through. That's what they're there for. And no, there's no judgment in these spaces, okay? The second thing is that you can pick your mental health professional. You're in control. Y'all are in charge. Y'all can decide who you want. And guess what? If you pick somebody and it just doesn't go quite well, not gelling for you, you have insurance. You can pick somebody else. You're not stuck with the first person that you land on, okay? Sitting down, sharing your deepest and darkest secrets, it could be difficult for anybody. And so regardless of whether this is another man or if it's a woman or if they're black or white, no, it doesn't matter who you are. That's difficult for you to do. So it's not just this is going to be difficult for Black men to have this conversation. Anybody who has to share in all parts of them is going to have a hard time, right? But one of the great things about seeking services is that in most cases you can select someone who you feel comfortable with. And again, it could be another person of color, Black man, Black woman, Black whatever, white. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're comfortable with, the options are out there for you. And then the last part, and I just want to say this again and again, is there's no shame in seeking treatment. I believe it's one of the strongest things we can do. One of the most honest and vulnerable things we can do is get help where we need it. It's pretending we don't need help and then continuing to hurt and suffer and then have others suffer around you that I think can be almost, it's definitely detrimental. And I think sometimes in some ways it's cowardly. Like we can be strong and address the obvious and it's okay. We can be strong. So there's no shame in seeking treatment. So when you're choosing a specialist, there's different types. And so this is something you're going to have to look up and know who's covered by your insurance. Just know that all are not the same. A psychiatrist is not the same as a psychologist. And then you have different licensed professionals that may do therapy, either couples therapy or anger management or substance abuse. There's all of these different types of counselors with different trainings. The biggest difference between psychiatrists and psychologists is that a psychiatrist is an MD and a physician who can prescribe medications. That's really the biggest difference. And so not everyone needs medication. So you may be fine with a clinical psychologist. But again, most clinical psychologists are very aware, keenly aware when they're seeing someone, when it looks like they may need medications. And so they'll get you connected to a psychiatrist and medications can be prescribed if necessary. And again, there's no shame in medications that may need to be prescribed as well. But all things don't need medication. Okay. This is one thing. You know me, you know me as Dr. Yolanda. I talk about nutrition all day long. So many parts of what we do and how we respond to the world and our stress has to do with the way that we eat. Guys, I need you, men and women. But often our men are on the late, the late bus with this, the late train. We want you, first of all, drinking so much water, plenty of water. Mental clarity, a lot of times, is connected with this cellular dehydration that we have. And we're not drinking enough water. And so it can make you foggy. It can make you angry, frustrated. There's all kinds of stuff that comes with that. So drinking plenty of water. Eating meals that are not high in sugar. They're not high in processed meats or foods. They're not high in trans fats. They're higher in protein. They're higher in fiber. They're higher in whole foods, fruits, vegetables, plant-based when you can. A plant-based diet does not mean you're vegan. Okay. A plant-based diet just means you eat more vegetables than anything else. So that is actually should be the normal average person. When you have a plate of food, you should have your protein should be probably 1/3 size as your vegetables. So many of us have grown up to eat a meat, a vegetable, and a starch. The problem is the starch is really unnecessary. You can do 2 vegetables and a protein, or if you're just doing 1 vegetable and a protein, you should do twice as much as the vegetable as the protein. So if you're doing shrimp and broccoli or, beef and broccoli or something like that, it should really be maybe a third cup and then 2/3 cups of the broccoli so that you have a full cup. Or if you're doing a whole cup of this and you're doing 2 cups, that's kind of a lot. So you just want to modify it so that it's 1/3 and 2/3 of the vegetables. I'm always going to go back to nutrition when I'm doing my show because that's what I like to talk about. And that's so important. But You have the different licensed professionals that you can choose from, and really there's just there's so much information about this, but I needed and wanted so much to have this conversation today. And again, our my prayers and all of my energy out to CJ today for handling what you need to handle, because it's all of us, have things that come up. But I'll see you next week, CJ, at the Harlem School of the Arts for our Black Men and Mental Health Initiative with Harlem Festival of Culture. So I'm going to end by Tom just talking. So, all of you know, or many of you know, if you've joined in my show, I have something called Dr. Yolanda's Plan for Keeps. And it's this deck of cards that I created. And there's 52 for the, all the face cards, but then you have the Joker and big Joker, the small Joker. So I have 54. And every day, every week of the year, you can pick a new card and something to do. And if it's a heart, it's like a self-care event or activity they want you to do. If it's a spade, it's going to be a challenge, an activity challenge, right, for yourself. If it's a club, let's go to diamonds first. If it's a diamond, that's a spiritual activity that I want you to. And when I say spiritual, not necessarily religious, but spiritual, something that's uplifting and that's really speaking to the spirit person in you. And then there is the clubs. Clubs are for intellectual stimulation, so maybe an intellectual stimulating challenge. So today, I shuffled through my cards and I chose the 8 of Hearts. And the 8 of Hearts was so appropriate for today. So the 8 of Hearts says, create a thank you card for yourself. And if those of you who are actually watching, this is what it looks like. This is not in color because I printed this out for today. But it says, create a thank you card for yourself. And thank you, Dr. Bernadette. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It says, gratitude is the quality of being thankful. And beyond that, the readiness to show appreciation. In its natural state, however, the brain is wired to pay attention to the negative and to focus on what's wrong. It is a survival skill that most people aren't conscious that they are utilizing. It's what keeps us out of harm's way, and it teaches us what to avoid in the future, similar settings. Therefore, it's important to actively recognize the tendency of the brain and move beyond our wiring to be able to access the positivity connected to gratitude. For example, sometimes we are so focused on what isn't going right in our career, our relationships, or our body, and or our social life that being asked to focus on gratitude becomes a major challenge. This is because to access gratitude, you need to look with optimism for what feels good, what's awe-inspiring, and or what warms your heart. In fact, where most of us have little to no practice is self-gratitude. This isn't the false thoughts of the ego, I'm great or smarter or better than, etc. Instead, appreciating yourself should be an exercise in humility. Self-gratitude is to recognize the gift that you are to the world with a sense of wonder. There's only one you. You are so unique, and only you do what you do. This week, take time to be grateful for your place on this earth and the divine spark within you. Sit down and express your sentiments in a thank you card and display your card somewhere that you will see it occasionally, just to remind yourself that you value yourself as much as you value others. Thank you, Vincent Duff. I appreciate you today. So I want you guys to know how much I love you. I want you guys to know how much I truly care about how stress is affecting your mind and your body and all the ways that you can actually mitigate that stress. One thing I touched on was nutrition. Obviously, I love to talk about meditation because meditation is what I do 2 times a day, 20 minutes a day. The type of meditation I particularly participate in is transcendental meditation. It is not the only meditation, so I don't want to say that. I don't want to push it on anyone. I want you to know, find something. Find something that allows you to settle yourself, to center yourself, and that empowers you to not react to your environment, but now you can respond. What I love that meditation does, and what mindful thinking and what eating right and what a proper amount of sleep and rest does for all of us, right? Exercise, is it balances us in a way that we now are not a ball of nerves, so that every time something happens, we react, and sometimes we overreact. It allows me to center myself and recognize the power within myself, and actually to appreciate the power. Like, I do this appreciation of myself all the time, not to such an extent that it's over appreciative, but I appreciate that I eat well, and that I treat my body right, and that I exercise, and that I'm walking, and that I take my breathing, seriously, and that I sleep, and that I, meditate. All of these things are really for longevity, right? It's for me to live a healthy quality life. But the other thing it really does is it makes me a more pleasant person for the people around me. It makes me more pleasant for my children. It makes me more pleasant and more efficient for my patients, for my girlfriends and my fiance. All these people, they benefit when I'm actually a nicer, calmer, relaxed person. So therapy has its place, though, guys. When you are dealing with these things, that breathing is not just going to get you through it. Meditation is not just going to get you through it. Eating right is just not going to get you through it. You actually need to talk to someone. I want you to reach out and find someone who is culturally competent, who understands you, understands your problems, understands your community, and is able to help you. And there is no shame in seeking help. Okay. So that is my time with y'all today. I appreciate y'all listening in. Make it a great month. Make it a great day. Write yourself that thank you letter and put it somewhere that you're going to see it occasionally, so you remember how much you appreciate you. All right. Let's make it a great one. All right, guys. Thank you. And I'll see y'all next month in July, where we're going to have the co-founders from the Harlem Festival of Culture on the show, because the festival is next month, July 28th, 29th, and 30th, right here in Harlem, New York. So I'm so happy that we're going to have the co-founders, and we're going to talk about what the festival will be, who will be on that center stage, and some of the things that you can come to expect for the festival. All right. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you soon.